Tourism, culture, and the arts is our point of focus. This is part 2 in Budget Matters. We are speaking with Tenisha Brown-Williams, a tourism educator, researcher, and practitioner, as well as Lyons, musical director and lead in Freetown Collective. Now, the last time we were speaking, Tenisha, you started to give us some information and data citing practices outside as to why we'd want to invest in tourism at this point in time. But Lyrics Man Lou, I'm wondering though, is one thing to have information, is another thing to act on that information, because sometimes you just look at figures, you don't know what to do with yourself. I want to cite the recent launch of the official video of DJ Private Ryan featuring Freetown Collective. Feel the love, the kind of emotions, the kind of visuals. When I look at that young lady in green, just transported. When I look at the big man thing, the moment that you and Mohammed hug, it's just raising spirit and raising energy. How important is this kind of content to the tourism, to the culture? And that is even before we talk about what energy is happening locally.
Absolutely critical. I would like to point to Ghana's model. Earlier, we spoke that Ghana was one of the countries that also had fusing of these ministerial portfolios. And this happened for Ghana as early as 2013. And one of the mandates of that ministry was to have culture integrated into the daily lives of its citizens before they figure out what the export was. Culture begins with us because it is in us. We make it. It is born from us. So being able to know how we feel, make things from that place, that sincere place of knowing how we feel, not only about ourselves, but about the very beautiful country that we live in, is the product. The product will have various expressions, whether it be music, fashion, other forms of art, but we are the product. And we have to be as authentically ourselves as we can be.
And in terms of narrative, the way we articulate, how do we say this? How do we put it down so that the way that we say things in the beginning impact the future outcome? Because it's one thing to say that we should and we ought to, but in terms of that, breaking that down, and because some things in black and white, they just kind of collect cobwebs. They don't go any much further than the page. But in terms of transporting it, what's some of these steps that you think we can be able to take?
One, I would like to say that there are positive unintended consequences of trying. Before you try, if you try to figure out what the entire picture would be, you would never try. So there's that X factor that I cannot speak to. But what I can speak to is we need to start formalizing and making visible the creative sector and the tourism sector. And this cannot be done without deliberate capturing of data. There are a lot of cultural workers who contribute to the economy daily, but we don't know who they are. We don't know where the points of concentration on our maps are. Then we are unable to group those numbers and make sense of the information. So one, we have to go about studying how we go about being cultural, how we go about making the things that we make, how we go about expressing ourselves, and extrapolate from that study. What are the best policies that are going to be able to make the most of what we are already doing?
And this kind of actually reminds me in terms of like practicing to be you and being the best you that you can be. And it actually takes me back to quote you saying that you want to be who you want to be and why you want to put another thing in front of you, this kind of way. But
yes,
Tenisha, how do we say this is the line, this is the role of government, this is the role of an NGO, how much is too much, who is supposed to do what?
Well, it starts with, and I want to support Lou in terms of understanding data, and part of research as well is looking at best practices. And we have a plethora of best practices with regards to the public, private sector, community-based partnerships that exist worldwide. But somebody has to be a leader. So it takes me back to Lou's point as well with regards to paying mind to culture and the arts. And it's the same thing for tourism. Somebody has to take the lead and be that champion for the development of tourism, culture, and the arts. So I just want to draw reference similarly to a similar circumstance where our Prime Minister took the lead with regards to the restoration of certain historical buildings in the last term. And things were done even after years. Some of those tourism icons and historical buildings around the savannah were neglected for years. But because he became that champion, things started to move along. And I'm saying that we need to have a clear understanding of the different roles, but we also need someone to champion the progress of the tourism, culture, and arts as sectors. And it goes back to my previous point. If there isn't political will to establish tourism and develop tourism in a country, we are not going to go anywhere very speedily. Those 14 indicators and that one indicator is crucial to our moving forward. And just lastly, on that same travel and tourism competitiveness report, we have one of the indicators that relates to cultural development. And sadly, when you look at the report, Trinidad and Tobago ranks very low on that particular index in relation to other countries. And it simply speaks not to the amount of cultural assets that we have, but it talks about the will and the action to develop it. And so we go back again to understanding roles, but having that actual will and desire to pursue what we need to pursue.
But Tenisha, I don't know why they fix them buildings. That money that they make to fix it, they could have do something, put it in some program or some kind of thing. How do you answer the person who says that?
Well, it's already done. So we can't reverse those decisions, but certainly it is an investment. If we're talking culture and heritage, as I started off saying, and defining culture and heritage as built and as natural and tangible and intangible. So at some point in time, those things should become a priority for development, especially if we're talking about preservation of heritage and promotion of culture. So that I'm not going to look back in the past and say if it was a good decision or not. It's already done. And it can be used in our current tourism and cultural assets inventory.
Take that and cool it deep. Lou, anything you wanted to add to that though?
Yes, of course. I think COVID has presented us with a very unique opportunity. And just looking at what we have been able to do thus far and comparing it to all the other countries that we have talked about that already grouped these ministries together, I noticed that we don't have an actionable website for these three ministerial portfolios coming together. And anyone who travels know that you're well traveled before you travel. You want to look up your destination. You want to get all the information. Even before you swipe that credit card, even before you punch in that payment detail, you want to be able to go there. You want to be able to teleport there and feel invested in the culture that you want to discover. In this down period, I believe this is quite the opportunity for us to invest and make some robust investments in our virtual infrastructure. We need to not only provide services to the citizens, and I'm speaking more favorably to the creative sector, because we don't like to leave home. We don't like to leave our place of ideas and inspiration. So baiting us to get most of our government services done virtually also gives the government the opportunity to collect metadata on the back end of those services, which gives them a better picture of how we operate, of how we shop, how we get government services. And it also sets up the economy for when travel becomes a reality again. We have so much actionable information, data about how we conduct ourselves as the creative industry and as the tourism industry.
And I guess doing it... Yes, please, Tenisha.
Yeah, so if I may just go back to the whole idea of these buildings that were restored, I just want to give some examples. So in more developed tourism destinations, I recall visiting one of those destinations, and their restored palace had gave us the opportunity to walk through those spaces with a virtual tour guide. So you got a headset, and as you move from one room to the next room, you got a history overview of the history of that room, what happened in that room. So it was an infusion of heritage and technology to monetize the space that was restored. So we're not talking about, yes, it's all well and good that these things were restored, but how do we now move to monetize it so that we can add to its further preservation? Because these things still need maintenance. Is it coming out of the government's purse to maintain? It should not. It should be a revenue stream through virtual tours and other ideas that could provide that revenue.
And we want to talk about money when we return, in the sense that what budget allocations should be going to specifically to carry forward tourism, culture, and the arts. Stay with us. We'll return with so much more.
I would love to see more investment in the performing arts, in the development of the sector, because as my colleagues have stated already, there is immense cultural value in terms of us seeing ourselves. We all know this is the era of in terms of that self-awareness and pride and love in self and nation. We need to see ourselves. If all we see are other nations and other stories, how do we understand ourselves? How do we really acknowledge the problems we have? We've talked about all of this. I'm not going to repeat the value that it has, the immense cultural value, but also economic. These days, performing arts is sexy. There is money in this, but it requires investment and development, right? And we all know, given the fact that our industries aren't developed, all of us artists are poor, right? We have to have some sort of Babylon work from 8 to 4 in order to survive and do what we love on this side. That is the nature of the beast, right? And with the internet, with this, leveling of playing field and this immense communication that we have globally, now is the time. We have connection to diaspora. We need to be investing in the arts and telling our stories, not just for us, but to the world.
Welcome back. We are speaking with Lou Lyons and Tenisha Brown-Williams about some of the allocations that they would like to see, the investments coming out of this budget towards tourism, culture, and the arts. Tenisha, what are some of your suggestions? Where do we put this money?
Sure. I'd say that I'm being very realistic. Over the last 2 decades or so, I don't think tourism has been given a budgetary priority in the past, and I think that in a COVID period, I'm not too sure if that will change. Having said that, one can dispute that, again, tourism is not going anywhere, and should we have a bigger allocation in the budget? What I want to suggest is that going forward, what we can do in the interim, many countries are creating what is called tourism nerve centers, which are bringing together various players within the industry, those who are affected by tourism, including rural communities, including CBOs and NGOs, and they're coming together to work out what is the next move. On June 13th in the Parliament, the Minister of Finance announced the establishment of a tourism task force. Unknowing to me, I'm not too sure if that task force was ever established, rather than indicated in Parliament, and I'm suggesting that is something as per best practice globally that is happening, that should also happen for Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, in 2017, the government would have indicated the establishment of a tourism licensing and regulatory authority. What a lot of countries are doing now as they prepare for recovery is take an inventory. At this point in time, Trinidad and Tobago does not have a registry of bona fide tourism businesses that we can go to and peruse. And that has further consequences for destination risk, reputational risk, because if we don't know who are these bona fide tourism businesses, and if we don't have oversight, then we can't control. And that's a serious thing in this COVID time, and even after COVID has lessened, because the traveler is going to be very sensitive to health, safety, and sanitation. And if, as a public service, we do not have sight of who are the players, the registered bona fide players in our industry, it can be problematic in the future.
And
So I just
speaking of
wanted
players,
to share
though,
this.
let me bring you in, please, Lou. And who is going to feel the love if you had your hand in the budgetary allocation?
Take everything Tenisha just said and just apply it to culture. Same thing. I would take a lot of that money and invest it into the National Artist Registry of Trinidad and Tobago. That is key in seeing the cultural workers as professionals if they belong to a registry. Not only that, it gives the government a very comprehensive list of things that can be qualified to be called cultural jobs or cultural endeavors. So the discovery of what we do culturally is very important, and we shouldn't skimp on that. Secondly, I would like to see some money pumped into digital footprint for these ministries. Like, I want to see state-of-the-art websites. I would like to see not only websites that display things, but also encourage participation. If government services to the tourism sector need to be met out to the public in COVID times, we want to maintain social distancing. Can we have those things accessible from home? Can we have businesses access services purely online? That would be very crucial to the development of these ministries and industries having its virtual life as well. And lastly, I would like to see some money pumped into more deliberate archiving of our culture. Let's say Carnival 2021 has been postponed. Do we have enough archives that we can now curate a virtual carnival that is true to the culture of who we are? Not only for us in Trinidad and Tobago who understand context, but if this is also an exportable product, do we have the archives to now make a virtual exportable product so that people can travel to Trinidad and Tobago virtually and experience a festival bar none virtually? If not, this downtime is necessary for us to get some money to prepare these things as packages.
All right, I want to play a last clip, and we want to thank the individuals who have given of themselves before to add to this conversation. Alicia Ifua Bartels, she wants capacity building to play a part in the allocation, but at the same time, she said she's not necessarily setting up herself for disappointment. We listen to her now.
If you look at the budgets that have happened throughout our lifetimes, I can't think of any occasion in which those of us who are in the arts community came away from it saying, oh my gosh, we're finally going to be supported to do some worthwhile stuff. You know, and so for me, I guess I don't really look out for anything in the budget. Of course, I still pay attention, I check it out, but it has not yet seemed to be a particularly worthwhile thing to invest my mental energy in, you know, considering what the budget may or may not do for the arts, because the answer is usually little to nothing.
And sadly, we're not going to be able to get responses to that at this point in time, but hopefully that just inspires the next round of conversations we have. We want to thank you so much, Lou Lyons, as well as Tenisha Brown-Williams, for being part of this conversation, focusing on tourism, culture, and the arts, and how the budget can affect that, how we can move on in spite of the budget, just moving forward, being our most authentic self. And we want to thank you on behalf of the entire news team. I'm DK Roster. Thank you for joining us. Good night.